Hey guys, welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest today is Ron Placone. He's a comedian and he's the host of Get Your News On with Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Sabrina. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. So, before we dive into Biden and everything going on with the left, can you tell everyone a little bit about your background and why you decided to start Get Your News On with Ron?
Sure. Well, I'm a comedian and I have been doing Get Your News On with Ron for a few years now. And, I was always interested in news and politics. Like I always did. Even when I was just kind of on the road, I had a segment called Thoughts, Rants, and Cold Coffee that was like all about the news of the day and stuff like that. So, Get Your News On with Ron happened when I moved out here to LA. And it was just one of those things like people were getting more and more into streaming. And I really liked it as well. And so I thought, well, what if there was this thing where you would just sort of stream a show and the news would just sort of, people could kind of send you what was going on, and you could kind of get your news on together. And so that's how it started. And then eventually that just became too much because people would like tweet me so much stuff and it'd be stuff that it's like I didn't really yeah, it just kind of became like that became like an overwhelming premise.
Mhm.
So it morphed into just me getting my news on with my guests. So the way it works now is like whenever I have a guest, which is, pretty much every episode I have a guest, I tell them about news that I'm really into, like stuff that like issues that are important to me and I really have, like labor issues and strikes are and protests are of interest to me and then a lot of digital rights issues. So I talk a lot about that sort of thing. I don't just talk about that sort of thing, but those are kind of the issues that are really heavy in my wheelhouse. So they kind of get their news on with me, and then the second portion of the show is me interviewing them and learning some about them. So that's kind of the dynamic of the show now. It's like you get your news on with Ron, and then Ron talks to you. So it's like part news, part interview, and that's the show now.
Awesome. So, Ron, there is clearly a divide on the left. I'm sure you've seen on Twitter as well as I have. I have my opinion about what may have started this, but I want to hear from you. What do you think is the reason for the division on the left?
Well, I think mostly, and I don't think it's anything new. I mean, I think this has been going on since at the very least, 2016, because I feel like we had the same, it was this same conversation, and I guess calling it a conversation is being gentle because I think in a lot of ways it's just bickering, but we had the same thing when it was Hillary. We had the same thing
Mhm.
about Hillary. It's like, do you vote for Hillary? Do you not vote for Hillary? Do you, like, do you do this? Do you that? And to me, and I've always kind of said the same thing. I'm not going to write somebody off if I have strategic disagreements with them, as long as they extend that same courtesy to me. I even made a video throughout the election season where I said, attention, people on, I forget the exact title, but I said, people on the left, I'm tired of hearing whether or not you're voting for Joe Biden. Like, I'm just sick of hearing about it because to me, and look, I mean, I'm not, I do not like Joe Biden. I think he is terrible beyond comprehension, but I think to just focus on, to kind of shame people if they're saying, okay, the other option is Trump, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for Joe Biden, or vice versa. If someone's like, I'm not participating in this duopoly anymore, I'm voting third party. I think to wag your finger at that person, whatever their decision is, to me, that's kind of missing the big picture of, yeah, but it's the system that forces this upon us. So your anger should be at the system, that gives us these diarrhea choices,
Yep.
as opposed to the voters who are just trying to deal with it the best they can. And especially to someone who maybe is not as into politics, so to speak. Maybe someone who is starting to be, starting to get more into more left-wing ideas and starting to kind of realize the big difference between a public option versus Medicare for all. And this is all kind of new to them. You know,
Hmm.
if you go up to that person and you say, yeah, these are kind of the issues that we're really serious about. And these are the different ways we think we can get there. And we don't agree on everything, but here's the ideas, that person's going to really want to be part of something. Or if you're just like, hey, did you vote for Biden in the last election? Yeah, yeah, I did. Well, you're a fucking idiot. See you later. That's not how you expand your numbers when you are still, in my, at least from my perspective, and I guess I could be wrong, but I think that the left is by far the smallest group politically in the United States, by far. So I think we're bigger than we thought. I mean, in
Hmm.
2016, that's the one, that's the biggest thing that Bernie did for all of us, and it was just right place, right time. He made us realize that we're not as alone as we thought we were. I mean, I used to think that, yeah, there's just a very small handful of people that think the way I do that live here. And I found out that's not the case. There's a lot of people.
Hmm.
And, there are, left wing ideas in the United States, which is by and large an extremely conservative country. When you really think about it, this is an extremely conservative country. As far as like pseudo democratic experiments go, I would say it is arguably the most conservative. I mean, it makes England look like a progressive utopia, and that's considered one of the furthest right countries out of all those. Like, you can't say EU anymore because they're not in the EU, but
Hmm.
in the EU and EU adjacent countries, like they're considered the big right wing one, and
Yep.
they're like they're super left compared to us. So we're a very conservative country as far as what's allowed in our politics. And so I guess to make a long answer even longer, I think that a lot of the division is strategic disagreements, frustration at doing nothing but lose for pretty much 100 years. Whenever people anoint themselves expert organizers or expert strategists or whatever, it's like, well, we've been losing for 100 years. So what are you an expert in exactly? I don't claim to be an expert in any. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm a comedian on YouTube. I'm just a guy who's trying to do his best, and I care, and I try my best. But I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I don't claim to be any better or worse than anyone else. If you are an expert, please let me know in what, because we've been losing nonstop for about 100 freaking years. I'm not saying that there aren't brilliant people out there. Of course there are, but I think it might behoove us to listen to each other.
Hmm.
Instead of thinking you're the you're the what do you call it, philosopher king.
Hmm. No, I agree. Like sometimes I have to remind myself, not everybody is into this, like we
Totally.
are.
Yeah.
And even politics in general, like some people just don't follow politics at all. They don't want anything to do with it. And so sometimes I have to remind myself about that. But I've seen people lose friends over force the vote.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen people lose. I don't know about force the vote specifically, but I've seen. And I've been guilty of it too. I mean, I've had some pretty, some arguments that have gotten kind of heated with like friends and family over the years about, and usually it was about just like Bernie or Hillary, or an issue like force the votes, another great example of that. Although I personally don't have anything specific there, but yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've tried to, I don't know. I mean, there's certain friendships that I've recovered where I'm just a little more selective with my battles, where it's just like, you know what, we're just not going to see eye to eye on this one. So we can either just let it go and be friends and focus on the 95% of things we do agree on. Or, if you don't want to be my friend anymore, that's fine. But you're not going to change my mind on this one. I'm not going to change yours. So, you know, it's up to us to decide whether or not we let this go. And that's happened for me. I mean, I have a friend who, again, like We agree on 95% of things. There's a couple things where strategically we are different. And we've gotten into it and it got kind of heated. And we were able to then, kind of repair that and just kind of talk it out and be like, look, I just see things differently. It doesn't make me a bad person and it doesn't make you a bad person either. We just see this differently and we both have our reasons. And part of it is because of our backgrounds and what we've experienced in life and our perception of the world around us. And that's okay. Um, so and I have other friends where it's like we have some strategic disagreements and it doesn't affect anything whatsoever. We just kind of talk about it
Hmm.
and it hasn't played a negative role in our lives whatsoever. So, you know,
It happens. I know. You brought up an interesting point about the country being more conservative than people realize. And I feel like I've been telling people this for a while that, like, people, yes, like we are leftists, but there's not as many of us as sometimes like we would think, right? Because like I'm in Massachusetts, and even here in Massachusetts, like people are like, "Oh, Massachusetts is progressive," and we're not as progressive as people would think. I mean, if you go back and look at the Democratic election, Biden won Massachusetts.
you guys are
Elizabeth,
really OG Democrat there. Like,
yeah.
and yeah, and I'm my wife is from Massachusetts, so I actually do spend some time there when I can. I love it up there actually. I really like Massachusetts a lot. Um but I live in California and I can say the exact same thing. People think California is some progressive utopia. We're not. Like I mean, yeah, are there some social things that California has that, you're thankful for? Absolutely. Like and I will say, and this is coming from someone, I have lived in red states before. I've lived in the Midwest, I've lived in the South, I've lived in the Northwest. I live in Southern California now in Los Angeles. Um there is a difference. Like there is a difference. There really is. Like there just is. Even when you live in a blue dot in a red state, um, you are reminded that you're in that red state.
Hmm.
And I can speak from some personal experience. When I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, for instance, whenever I would go to vote, I was seldom, if ever, voting for anything. I was just voting against terrible things from happening. I was going to vote against this bill that was going to set women's rights back 30 years. I was going to vote against this bill that was going to, privatize transportation even further and make it even worse in the city. I was voting against this bill that the Koch brothers funded. I
Hmm.
mean, that was basically, and it was literally in the most literal sense, like there was not even a Democratic Party, really. It was just Republicans. And even though you kind of lived in the blue dot, Nashville's a relatively progressive city, especially compared to the rest of the state. You're still reminded what state you're in,
Yep.
and it's not the easiest thing to deal with. And I went to college in Indiana, so I know what it's like to be in the blue dot in red state. It is different, at least in a place like California and in a place like Massachusetts. You do get to push for things like like public banks, like a single
Hmm.
payer healthcare plan in your state. I know Massachusetts is pushing for that. So is California. Y'all were the first people to get gay marriage in Massachusetts. So there is a difference, yes, but if somebody really asked me where is the most progressive place, like where is a progressive place in the United States, I would say that there's no such thing.
Right.
Unless maybe Eugene, Oregon. I've never lived there, but I would say there isn't really a progressive state for sure in the United States. It doesn't exist.
Agreed. I want to hear your thoughts on the Biden administration.
I
What do
love
you
him. He's crushing it. He's the
what do you
best.
I know, right? Like what do you feel that the Biden administration is doing wrong right now?
Oh, geez. I mean, where where do you want me to? Well, the fact that they have the job really bothers me. No, I think that Biden, and I guess this is par for the course. I mean, what few gestural things he's done, and they have been out there. I mean, hey, it's better that we're in the Paris Accord than not being in the Paris Accord. That's cool, but it's nowhere even in the realm of enough to meet the moment when it comes to climate change. And that I think is a snapshot of what that administration is all about. They'll give you some lip service, they'll do some gestural things that of course aren't bad things. It's good, but they don't even scratch the surface of doing anywhere close to enough. You know, people didn't get that $2,000 they were promised. It didn't happen. And it was just a bunch of BS. No $15 an hour minimum wage. And I don't know if we're going to get that even.
Mm-mm.
I think we're going to get something now, but it's only because people are striking,
Right.
which I am thrilled to see. No, that public option he was promising. Where's that? Where is what was the other big thing where he was promising? I mean, they did push him on the vaccine patents,
Mhm.
but that was because of public outcry. That's not because he wanted to be a nice guy or he's not in bed with big pharma. So I think that like the easy like the quickest answer there is they're not doing anywhere close to enough to meet the moment,
Mhm.
and they don't have any interest in really changing that. And so y- it's basically Obama all over again, where, they have full control. They are going to do the absolute bare minimum. They're going to blame everyone except for them. I mean, we're already seeing the same thing happen. Obama's first, well, it's not his fault. It's because Congress is being hard on him, the Senate. It's not Joe Biden's fault. Joe Manchin is Joe Manchin. Well, guess what, Blue? No matter who, folks, we had a chance to get rid of Joe Manchin. We
Mhm.
had a chance to get rid of Joe Manchin, and you guys were all just blue no matter who. And now you're blaming Joe Manchin for everything. Isn't that convenient? Isn't that
Yep.
convenient? So I think that's the Biden administration. They're not doing anything close enough to meet the moment on. I mean, he already bombed Syria. He
Yep.
already, he's given the military industrial complex even more money. He's not meeting the moment when it comes to police brutality. He's just giving them more money and just kind of shrugging. He's offering nothing,
Yep.
no solutions, not even acknowledging the problem. Foreign policy, he's been a disaster for 40 years. That's not changing. Not meeting the moment on climate change, not even entertaining the idea of a public option on healthcare, backing down on the $15 an hour minimum wage. I mean, we've gotten a few gestural things. There's a couple things in the infrastructure bill that are a little encouraging, in particular the broadband portion. But again, that bill as a whole is beyond disappointing. It's less than he was promising on the campaign trail.
Yep.
Like he was promising, I think, what was it, like 6 trillion, something like that. He proposed 1.7. It's absolutely ridiculous. And these people who throw these cliches out there, like, well, politics is about compromise, and you're just, there is some truth in that, sure, but you're really just making excuses for this BS donor centric system that needs to just end. Like it
Yep.
just can't keep going.
So that April jobs report came out, and Biden's in denial about that. And I can tell you, like here, I know a lot of people that cannot find a job.
Hmm.
It's nothing like it was before. Like, yes, people are posting more jobs, but friends of mine that work in HR have actually told me they are overwhelmed with the number of job applications they're receiving. So half of them don't even get looked at. And I feel like
Sure.
Biden's in denial about that too.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And it's because they have no, I mean, Biden, I can't imagine Biden ever considering something like a jobs program, at least not a real one, I mean, not an extensive one. So yeah, I just don't see them meeting the moment. And I think a lot of people, when they give him these passes and they're trying to make it out like, I mean, even just the whole Biden's going to be an FDR, that is just laughably uh pathetic. I mean, Biden, and again, FDR wasn't perfect, by the way, but FDR actually had foresight. Biden doesn't have that. So to
Mm-mm.
say he'd be an FDR is just ridiculously false. The comparison people should have made is that there's the potential for Biden to be an LBJ. What I mean by that, LBJ was an asshole, but he signed some okay stuff because he had no choice. Because there was civil unrest at huge proportions, and he couldn't get away with not doing certain things. He had to do certain things, so he did. That's the best you can hope for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is an absolute terrible corporatist politician. He has been for over 40 years. We know who this guy is. He gave us 40 years of freaking clues. You knew who he was on the campaign trail. And if you
Mm-hmm.
voted for him in the primary, I don't know what you were thinking because, we had a chance for a transformational presidency at a moment where we needed it more
Mm-hmm.
than ever. And we didn't get it. We didn't get it. So, I mean, like for me, honestly, like in so many ways, 2020, the election ended in March. The election ended when Bernie dropped out because it's like, well, now no matter what, we are stuck in that ricochet wheel of neoliberalism and neo-fascism. We're stuck there no matter
Yep.
what. And you just kind of watched it happen. And it's one of those things. Am I thrilled Trump's gone? Absolutely. I was thrilled to see that guy go away. But the smile left my face real quick, realizing that, well, that means Biden wins. And you know
Mhm.
what? It's okay to fucking feel that way. I know people need to go even a step further and shame you for feeling that way. You're not allowed to be happy Trump's gone. Yeah, you are. You're allowed to be happy Trump's gone. You're not allowed, or on the other side, like you need to be happy that Biden won. No, you don't have to be. You don't have to be happy that Joe Biden is president. You can be happy Trump's gone and not happy that Biden is president. Because you know what? That's an appropriate response to this bullshit system. That's an
Yep.
appropriate response. So you're not a contradiction if you feel that way. You have every right in the world to feel that way, and I think most people should. I don't see how you couldn't, looking at the world around and looking at those two um, complete piles of garbage for candidates.
Yep. I agree. What do you think happens next election cycle? Are we going to see a red wave?
Probably, yeah. I think so. I mean, I think it's going to be a bloodbath in the midterms, and I think Republicans are, at the very least, they will retake the House or the Senate. I think probably both.
Mhm.
But I think at the very least they will get one of them, and then just the cycle repeats. I mean that's just it never like changes, and it just gets further and further to the right. I forget, is it called the ricochet effect, or what's the actual word for it, where it's like they go really far to the right, and then they go a little bit back to where they were before, but not quite
Mhm.
to where they were before, and then it goes further right again. I mean, we're seeing that happen in real time. There used to be a corporate rate of 35%. Trump took it down to 21. Biden's going to maybe take it back to 28. Well, we're still not where we were before. And then the next Republican's going to take it even further to the right. And this cycle continues. And who wins at the end of the day? Wall Street. Who owns both parties at the end of the day? Wall Street. What a coincidence.
Agreed. I mean, like, I'm honestly really afraid. So, like, Nick from Fred Hampton's Leftist, we were
Hmm.
talking about this. Like, we're really afraid that Kamala Harris could win because, like, her fans, oh my God, the K Hive, they came after me on Twitter. And I didn't realize they were this fierce. And it eventually got to the point where I was like, look, I can't keep like tweeting stuff. I have to go to bed. But like they just swarmed in like boom. And I was like, oh my gosh,
well,
oh my God.
well, there's a good chance they were getting paid, and you're not. You're not
True.
getting paid to tweet. You're just tweeting. They probably are. I mean, that's been exposed. Like K Hive, similar to Correct the Record. It's her troll farm.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, they are something. And it's, you kind of see it where you see a lot of, I mean, I get trolled by the so-called K Hive too at times. And a lot of times, like if I click on the profile, like if it's on Instagram, for instance, you find it's someone who just joined this month. They don't have any posts. Their photo is just this blurry photo that looks like it could be a stock photo, and you realize, oh, you guys are paid trolls. Like this is just,
Mm-hmm.
and this is not a conspiracy. Like this is documented. I mean, Hillary Clinton did this with Correct the Record. K Hive is just um, the new chapter of Correct the Record, basically. So, I mean, does she have some, you know, militant fans out there, Kamala Harris? Sure. I mean, some of them are genuinely big fans of hers, absolutely. But it's also a troll farm. Like a lot of them are just literally paid trolls. And it's so interesting because I saw an article once that was celebrating the K Hive, like it was trying
Hmm.
to, and even in their attempt to celebrate the K Hive, they sort of unmasked the K Hive because they just said they're not really concerned about policy. They just love Kamala Harris. And they said it like it was a good thing, like, God, they just love her so much. And it's like, yeah, this is politics. You're not supposed to worship the politician. A
Yep.
politician is at best, a reformer and a tool for change. That's what they are at best, in the best case scenario. Usually, they're a lot less than that. Usually, they're just roadblocks to change. Usually, they're not respectable people. They're
Right.
dishonest. They're shysters. They're just very wealthy con artists. I have met more people in the political arena over the past 5 years than I have ever wanted to in my lifetime. It is an overwhelmingly negative experience. People ask me, would you ever run for office? No, I never would, because I could never really participate in that way in a system I have zero respect for,
Mhm.
in a system that I don't think should exist the way it does. Um, And I think if other people had the peeks under the hood I've had, and again, this is just, it's not like I was even a staffer or anything. This is just as a comedian who has participated in some political comedy shows on YouTube. And even just the peek under the hoods I've had, every worst
Mhm.
suspicion I've ever had has been confirmed. I mean, as a lefty, like you would look around, and I'm talking, years ago, even going back as far back as 2004, you'd look around something like the Democratic Party and you think, gee, I don't really fit in here, but I guess my other option's the Republicans. And I feel like a lot of these people feel the same way I do, I think. And then you find out, no,
Oh,
no, at the establishment level, at least, not amidst the base, not amidst the people, but amidst the establishment. No, no, no. They hate you the most. They hate lefties more than anything. They hate you. They like the Republicans because the Republicans allow them to exist the way they do. They wouldn't be able to exist the way they do if they didn't have something so gruesome in the Republicans going, well, you got to pick us or you get those guys.
yep.
That's just the way it works. And it is the pettiest, counterproductive, just horseshit thing I've ever seen in my life. This is coming from a person in show business who did musical theater in high school. It is the pettiest bullshit I've ever seen in my life. And it's reflected in the YouTube space that has pretty much devolved into professional wrestling. And it is just so, I mean, yeah, you look around and you just think, holy shit. Um, so for me, I get my hope from what I see in the streets. I get my hope
Mhm.
from people going on strike. I get my hope from the mutual aid efforts that I see in my neighborhood and around the country. I get my hope in all the Zoomers who are so politically engaged and they're so active and they're such a badass generation. I think they're freaking awesome. And and that's the only thing that kind of keeps me going. I mean, when you if I thought that the whole circumference of the left was just what I saw on Twitter and YouTube, I would probably be trying to move. I would have no faith whatsoever. But I realize that that's not the case,
Mhm.
and that's what gives me hope.
When you look back at the squad in the beginning, do you feel that they had good intentions at the start and then things just they fell into the status quo once they got into office, or do you feel like even from the beginning they were still politicians?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not a mind reader. I try not to like over speculate what is going on inside someone's head, But I think that I think you have to play the game to a certain degree, which I understand that. However, it's a lot of the squad members have really proven that they're putting party first over their base. I mean, they just, with what AOC did with that money and just the way they wouldn't stand up to Pelosi. They wouldn't. I mean, they've had several opportunities to use their leverage. And look, I concede to the truths that are out there. I concede that, yes, they are grossly outnumbered. Yes, they, like there's not a lot of them. Yes, they do have to play the game some to get what they want. I acknowledge all those things. I'm not one of these people where I expect them to walk on water and always make me happy every time they tweet. I'm not one of those people. All I ask is when you have the leverage to use, frickin' use it. That's how politics works. They're not doing that. That's a problem. I mean, it'd be like, they're in this burning building and they don't have everything they need and they don't, but they do have some equipment to start fighting the fire. And they're like, we just don't have enough equipment. And it's like, there's a hose in your freaking hand. I know that it's not enough, but if you use that hose, it's going to make it better. And then hopefully it keeps getting better. They're like, well, we can't use the hose. Like, why?
Yep.
Why aren't you using the hose? We elected you and sent you in there to use the freaking hose. I get it. There's more work to be done, but you got some leverage. You got to use what you got. And that's what I think is so freaking frustrating. And I don't think people are unreasonable with what well, some people are, of course. That's how the world is, but I don't think it's unreasonable to say when you got your leverage, freaking use it.
Right.
So, and that to me is just not acceptable. And that's why I don't think anything can really be salvaged within the Democratic Party. I think that we need to kind of break up this duopoly. And it's not impossible. It's a very difficult feat, but it's not impossible. And I think electorally, that's what needs to happen. I think any change that we can expect from this duopoly, it will only come about via mass movements. It will only come about via these people have no choice but to enact actual change. That's how it's always been when you think about
Mhm.
it. I mean, really, we didn't get the New Deal because FDR just felt like being a nice guy. We got the New Deal because he looked outside and there was an organized left. There was, I mean, keep in mind, it was the anarchists, the socialists, the communists, labor, the unions. They didn't agree on everything. They had their strategic differences, just like what we have now. They had strategic differences back then too. They didn't all sing kumbaya together. They didn't always walk, lockstep together, but they were able to cooperate with each other just enough to have a mass movement that couldn't be ignored. And that's what we need now. We don't have to agree on every strategy. That's never going to happen. We don't even have to get along every day on Twitter. It's okay. But if we could cooperate just enough, we could repeat that. We could repeat history and we could hopefully start building a better tomorrow instead of just getting a band-aid on something. So I forget what your question was, but that's what I have to say about whatever that topic was.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Third party is always, that's an option too. Unfortunately, they're not on the ballot in every state. Do you think there's an opportunity for that? If they were to get on the ballot in every state, I don't know, something like if the Green Party merged with like a working party or something like that, do you think that that could be successful?
I do think that if we all merged all of our third party efforts, that yeah, we could. Because I mean, when you look at things like ranked choice voting is growing, especially in your state, Massachusetts is really heavy on that. Because I think again, because when you see stuff and you realize the potential of it, then you want it. Massachusetts is really pushing for ranked choice voting. Well, I think
Mhm.
one of the reasons is probably because Maine got it.
Yep.
I know Lisa Savage ran for, I believe it was Senate up in Maine. She wasn't successful. I was hoping she was going to do a lot better. Um, but she did get opportunities that as an independent, running a completely independent campaign, she would not have gotten if there was not ranked choice voting. It did open some doors. So while the results were not what we wanted or even close, there were some reasons to realize we're on the right path here as far as ranked choice voting and getting other candidates visibility. So yeah, I do think and that's why I was that's why I'm intrigued by the People's Party. I went to their convergence conference in 2017 and I
Mhm.
saw the DSA, the SA, the Green Party, the Sunrise Movement, the Extinction Rebellion, and just regular scientists and academics and labor activists and mutual aid activists and content creators. And I saw everybody kind of getting together and exchanging ideas and talking these things out. And I thought, if we can harness something like this and channel it, we have a real movement that's going to bring about change. And to me, that's huge, and it takes inside out approach. I mean, a lot of it goes beyond electoralism.
Mhm.
Like strikes, protests, mutual aid efforts, that's all outside of electoralism. And then you got local electoralism, which is its own animal too. Um, so that's all appealing to me. And I think that if we did have a fairly unified third party effort, it could be successful. Yeah. How exactly that'll transpire, I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you, but I don't. But I do think that if every single third party lefty effort coalesced, um, we could be a force to be reckoned with.
Agreed. All right, Ron, I have one more question for you. What do you think the left needs to do in order to win?
Huh. Everything we talked about. I think yeah, I mean I think that first of all you need to have a huge, I mean I'm a big STAN for a general strike. I think
Mhm.
it needs to happen. I think there is no other choice. You need to have a huge, massive general strike. That is going to take a lot of mutual aid. That is going to take a lot of organizing. That's going to take, and a lot of factors that I can't even think of off the top of my head, nor am I qualified to lead such a thing. And I don't know who is, to be honest with you. But it needs to happen. We need to have a general strike, a massive general strike. Um, I think we need to have more cause-based initiatives that are very much seeking the causes, be it climate change, living wages, ending the wars, healthcare. When I see stuff like whole Washington and Washington State, and we
Mhm.
have a single payer push here in California as well. I think those things are incredibly important. When I see things like people united in action for Julian Assange, when I see something like the Fred Hampton leftist. I mean, folks like Rome, that
Mhm.
guy's like just doing mutual aid all over the country now. He's like on a tour with it. That's the kind of stuff that really does shift a society towards the better. It's encouraging that it is happening. It needs to happen a lot more and on a much larger scale. But that's kind of my answer. And then on the electoral end, I think electoralism will follow, and I only see success happening via breaking the duopoly and having more than a two-party system. I know a lot of people who are going the reform the Democrats route. I don't think they're bad for feeling that way. I don't, begrudge them for it, and I will still, you know, I usually don't get to vote for anybody like that because unless they're running in your district, you can't vote for them. So I never really get to do anything about that on the ballot. Most of the time on my ballot, I leave the candidates blank because usually it's just a corporatist or a corporatist. So I'm like, I don't want to vote for either one of you. So I'm just, and usually it's just two Democrats because I live in California where it's a jungle primary. So it's just the top two advance. So usually it's corporate Democrat A or corporate Democrat B. And I just say, no, no, thank you. And typically I'll vote for either the Peace and Freedom Party candidate or the Green Party candidate. And if that's not an option, I just leave it blank. But but yeah, I think we need to have a viable alternative to these two parties because the Democratic Party has no interest in being reformed. They've made that abundantly clear. They've spent over $50 million to make sure they're not quote reformed. And guess what? If they start to lose more, you know what they're going to do? They're going to spend another $50 million to make sure that that doesn't happen, and then they'll spend another $50 million after that. So to me, it just makes more sense to try to break the duopoly, which can be done through a grassroots effort, and have a viable alternative to these two corrupt beyond repair corporate parties.
Agreed. Everyone, I'll be sure to put Ron's link to his channel in the description below. Ron, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.